Welcome to the Productivity Podcast. Delighted today to be joined by Prashant Nair, who is CEO of Double Gemini. Hi, how are you?
Good. How about yourself, Simon?
Very good, thank you. So that doesn't sound like a British accent, so tell us where you're based.
So I'm based out of New York City, and my offices are in Soho for anybody that's visited. So
Yep, I was there
it's
not 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago in New York. I was in. I know that area well. Nice part of town.
yeah, love it here. And also, I should say, Simon, thanks so much for having me on the podcast. Excited to be here.
No, more than welcome. Looking forward to this one. Looking forward. So we're going to find out a bit more about Double Gemini, the kind of 5 core productivity categories that you work with clients on and how you help all the kind of those productivity improvements. But first, let's find out a bit more about you. So can you give us some of your career highlights, what you've done, how you ended up being CEO of where you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. So background is I actually had started in the logistics industry, ended up having a knack for project management. I think people always funnel you, regardless of what career you start out in, into areas that you do pretty well. And so I worked in the logistics industry in Michigan and ended up moving to New York in 2000. And I formed Double Gemini and started it as a project management firm. Now, New York is a big, small place. People started talking, and next thing you know, about a decade later, I was starting to manage larger and larger projects up to the point where at Double Gemini, we were managing $60 million projects with maybe 150 people on a project team. So highly complex, mission critical projects for blue chip companies, mostly out of New York City. Now, as the projects were getting bigger and bigger, I needed to stay on top of my game because I'd be getting 350 emails. I'd be doing meetings with CIOs, CEOs, COOs, and project teams. And so I started to create these productivity processes that would support the business, basically techniques that I could use to stay on top of my game. And then maybe even more importantly, techniques that I could teach the project team so that we could execute. So that was all well and fine. And around 2011, I started getting a lot of requests from my clients to actually teach them these techniques because they saw how effective they were on the projects I was managing. And so that's when Double Gemini in its current incarnation was really born. And so from there, I've spent the last decade focusing on honing these techniques and really figuring out how to teach individuals, teams, and organizations in a way that was transformational, one that was focused on really building habits, not just teaching classes. And so that's what we do today. I consider myself the CEO and product architect here at Double Gemini. And I really enjoy this particular line of work. People tend to come out of our workshops and after learning our techniques with a lot less stress, a better outlook on life. It accelerates careers. Businesses have happier employees. They experience better results. It's pretty rewarding, and I really love doing this.
Amazing. So an amazing journey. And then because of the great work you've been doing internally, that kind of pivot where people were coming to you saying, I see what your people are doing and how they're managing. I want some of that. How do I get it for my team? So fascinating stuff. And we're going to talk about those categories, those steps that you use in a second. But let's just, I suppose, think of things at a slightly higher level. And we've exchanged emails kind of before we've recorded today. And some of those are talked around productivity crisis, around the lack of or loss of productivity in the workforce. What are you seeing and what's kind of brought you to those views?
Yeah, so what I've really seen is that the workplace doesn't prioritize attention. It's interesting. The Bureau of Labor Statistics here in the U.S. did a stat, and they found that the average annual productivity decreased by 1.3% between 2021 and 2022. And this was the largest decline in the measure since 1974, when it decreased 1.7%. And I think this all makes sense. It comes down to attention. People want to get stuff done, but in order to do that, you need attention. Attention, from my point of view, is really the currency of productivity. When I talk to people about this, I actually like to explain it with an example. So there's this researcher, Tom DeMarco. You may have heard of him. He wrote many books on project management. And back in the 70s, he discovered that for his engineers, software engineers, to do any type of deep work task, it took them 15 minutes to concentrate and then 10 minutes to produce any meaningful work. So basically, if you're not working for 25 minutes, you're spinning your wheels. I'm sure that you've experienced that when you're doing deep work, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So here's what usually starts to happen, and this is something maybe you can relate to. So you start warming up, and you're getting into these 15 minutes, and then ping, oh, you got that Slack message. Well, what do you got to do? Got to warm up again, right? So then you warm up and then you just starting to crank a little bit on the work, and then ping, you get that email notification. So then you warm up again, and then ping, you get the text message. And basically people go through this cycle where tasks that should have taken them 1 hour take them 2 or 3 hours just because of this constant barrage of interruptions. And so, and even if we go even further, people's work days aren't really structured to promote attention on top of that, right? So aside from the technologies ruining you, I remember looking at one employee's calendar, and they had 30-minute meetings with 30 minutes in between peppered throughout their day. So basically, every time they had just finished warming up and got 10 minutes of productive time, they were sucked out of it and dropped into another meeting. And so this is the way that people work. Cal Newport spoke about it in his most recent book, and he talks about this concept called the hive mind, and how this type of pattern of constant interruptions, due to the technologies, due to the structures, the way that companies are organized, is really killing our attention, and it's resulting into a huge number of issues. Right? People are burnt out. They don't feel like they're being productive. They're stressed because they're never getting anything done. Everything is taking them 2 to 3 times as much time as it should. And, all in all, it's resulting in this burnout and this cognitive overload. And individuals and companies don't know what to do about it. So that's kind of my take on this, the larger overall problem. We're basically in this situation where there's a productivity crisis, and people need people and organizations need new strategies for dealing with it.
Yeah, lots of those points I'm sure will resonate with lots of people that are listening. Certainly, I think the work-life balance has been stretched because of post-pandemic, how we worked and what we learned in lockdown. People seem to send emails, so we've talked a lot about emails, and we'll come on to that in a second, a lot later in the day. If I receive one, does that mean I feel obliged to reply to it? Certainly other people send them a lot early in the morning. So there's almost this never off, isn't there? This 24/7, always connected mindset or world that we live in that really hampers that as well, and doesn't give us that focused time to put things down, to get ready, and then be in that productive mindset. It kind of reminded me when you were speaking, people at Apple have got focus mode on their iPhones now. I don't know if you're an iPhone user, but you can set work focus mode or sleep focus mode so that you're not getting pinged by Slack or by messages or by notifications. So it helps you. So there's a lot more recognition now, I'd say. But let's get into how you and your methodologies can start to help unlock that and make us more productive. So I think we were going to start with email productivity.
That sounds great. You want me to just dive in? Yeah, a particular area you want me to focus on?
So we've talked a lot, and you've mentioned emails quite a number of times in the build-up to where we've got to. So why is email productivity a specific issue? Is it the volume? Is it the time they're sent? Is it just the fact it's a lazy way of communicating potentially, especially if you're copying lots of people in?
Yeah. So first off, I think that one thing to recognize about email, especially in the way that a lot of people work, is that it's actually ubiquitous for work, right? So it's we have a pharma client. It's their project management system, their note taking system, their customer support system. It's their way of doing any type of sales work. And it's also a communication system, right? And so it's a central tool which is really essential to having for many businesses for how they run. But the way that people operate it results in a situation where it's basically stealing their attention and fragmenting their thinking. So Microsoft did these couple of interesting things. So in 2022, in February, Microsoft said that there were 40 billion more emails than 2021. So all of these emails went online as people started pursuing this hybrid work approach. And, these are conversations that normally would have happened like around the water cooler, right? And then furthermore, they had another stat from February of last year that the average person checks their email 72 times a day. And let's say 60 of those happen during the workday. So that means they're checking their email every 8 minutes. So kind of going back to my previous example, how is anybody supposed to concentrate? And then on top of that, people just don't have a good technique for actually how they manage their emails, right? Most people show up at work, they give them their email account, and then they say, go for it. And so what they end up is kind of cobbling together this system, which ends up really being a system that's poorly defined, almost a system of worst practices for managing their email. And as a result, they don't have a way of unplugging from it because they don't have systems that they can trust. They feel like they constantly need to be checking their email, or they're going to be missing out on major things with respect to work. And to go a little bit further, I think that the way most people operate their email creates a lot of stress. So there's with email, there's the fear of missing out on a message, which is a real fear, especially if you're remote. There's a fear of not being responsive. There's a there's anxiety just due to the volume of emails. There's anxiety due to the content of emails. There's this stress because most inboxes are cluttered and have thousands of email messages. There's stress because people are worried about emails slipping through the cracks and they don't have a good system for dealing with it. And so when you just basically put it all together, it ends up being a situation where people are almost operating with this low grade fever with respect to email. And so I kind of recognize that. And that's one of the reasons that I created Stack, is just to really solve those problems.
And what does the Stack method do? How do you implement it? What things would it typically look like when you're talking to clients about, this is a situation you've got yourself in, this is how the Stack method will help you get out?
Got it. Yeah. So I started working on figuring out email back in 2004. And it took me actually a number of years where I was experimenting with different patterns and approaches for managing their email. And then maybe around 2012, I finally had this breakthrough. And the breakthrough was a realization that emails aren't messages, they're actions. If you look at your email inbox, and most people do that, they see message, 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 message. But what I see is reply, do, review, delegate, forward, file, and so on. I see a set of actions. And once you understand that emails are actions, then what you can do is you can group and organize your emails by types of action and be far more efficient with respect to how you do them. Now, the way that most people, so Simon, you get your mail, right? It comes in, in your mailbox. And what's the first thing you do with your mail? You probably sort it, right?
Yep.
Bills, letters, junk, so on, right? Most people get their inboxes, when you look at them, there's nothing that's sorted. There's nothing that's organized. So what Stack does, it's an approach for organizing emails by types of action where you can batch process based on those actions. So emails come in and you sort them based on the common actions that are pertinent to your job. So maybe it's a reply, do, file, print, delegate. Maybe it's a sign. Whatever those actions are, you sort your emails into action folders, and then you batch process them by type of action. And it turns out that it's just far more efficient, because once you're in a particular mode of thinking, like let's say one of the actions is scheduling, because you have to schedule meetings that come in and meeting requests. Well, when you're scheduling meetings, you're going to need to look at your calendar, right? So you open that folder, that action folder, you look at your calendar, and you can efficiently prioritize those emails and schedule those meetings. So when employers come to me, I say this is the crux of the problem: is people just don't understand how to approach their email in the right way. And then furthermore, if you don't have a system for organizing and processing your emails that's efficient, then you'll never end up trusting the system. And if you don't trust the system, you're going to kind of default back to the way that you normally process your emails. And then we take it a step further, and we help people orchestrate their time with respect to email. So they're just checking email 2 or 3 times over the course of a day, and efficiently processing them in batches by action during those time periods. So that's a little bit about how the stack method works. Now, one thing that's fascinating that I found is that when somebody masters the stack method, they typically regain about a month of their work time per year. And that's not an exaggeration. This is based on time studies, self-reporting. Our last time study was at Merck Pharma, and the average person there was actually getting back about 1.5 months of time per year, which is just astonishing. And the reason is because they were more efficient at processing their email. So they go from 55 minutes to process their email during a stacking session down to 25 to 30 minutes. And then on top of that, because they trust the system and they could do it so efficiently, they didn't feel the need to constantly check their email throughout the day, and they could just check it at these punctuated times and really focus on getting their work done more efficiently. So that's a little bit about the stack and how it works.
So from an employee's point of view, I've got a real structure to work towards. It's going to probably make me less anxious about when things drop in and what the content is. And then I can periodically check in, as you say, throughout the day rather than constantly check in. And then from an employer's point of view, you've got that focus and that readiness and that kind of peak productivity and work point of view in between those check-ins. Am I reading that right?
Yeah, you're reading that right. It's well summarized. One other kind of cool thing about this is that Stack is free. So when COVID kicked off in March of 2020, our clients were telling us that they were getting crushed by email. As I mentioned, all these water cooler conversations were going online. So we released the Stack method for free at stackmethod.com, and there's with no strings attached. So there's no email, there's no firewall. And since then, over 100,000 people have come to the site. And we get constant feedback from people on how helpful this has been for them. So individuals and organizations that are interested in implementing it can watch all the videos, get the setup, get the how-tos. Everything is there for free.
Amazing. And we'll put the link in the show notes to make it even easier for people to find. So that's kind of email in the Stack method. We wanted to move on and talk about file management. So give us a bit of insight into what you mean by file management and why you're seeing that's an issue as well.
So if you go into most organizations and start interviewing people and teams and ask them where they're putting their files, they're putting them all over the place, right? Some people are putting on their personal drives. Some people are storing in SharePoint or Dropbox or Drive. There's no central form of organization around it, no organizational structures or rules, or if they are, they're really just kind of bare bones things where they'll say, okay, here's a team folder, but then you open the team folder and everything inside that team folder is chaos. And so I would say that literally every organization that we have worked with has a disaster of a filing system. Now, don't get me wrong. They know about that, which is why they bring us in. And I think that if you think about it, digital clutter leads to mental clutter, which basically slows everything down. It slows things down on an individual level, on a team level. It slows things down from a collaborative level. So there's a lot of implications to that particular issue. Let me dive in with one more thing here. Let me give you a little example. So imagine, Simon, there's this guy named Bob, right? And so here's what usually happens with Bob. He has to store a spreadsheet for an analysis he's doing, but he doesn't have a good place to store it. So he kind of debates between storing it on his desktop in SharePoint or on a shared folder, and then ultimately he decides to store it on his desktop. But then he doesn't know how to name the folder, so he names it analysis, and he doesn't know how to name the file, and so he gives it something forgettable and non-specific. And then he works on this, and then he emails it out. And then whenever anybody asks him for the file, he has to find it, which is a pain because he never named it well or put it in any place that was really logical. And he also, so he has just no good way of managing this over time. 6 months later, Bob needs the spreadsheet. He doesn't remember where he stored it. It takes him 30 minutes to find it. And on top of that, it just stresses him out every day when he's just looking at his file system. So then maybe another 6 months goes by and Bob leaves the company. Then Susan, one of his colleagues, remembers that Bob worked on a similar project, but his files are gone and they left with him. So when you put this together, there's kind of this whole slew of problems. People spend a lot of mental bandwidth figuring out how to store files. They spend a lot of time just trying to find them. Collaboration is tremendously inefficient between teams because there's no easy sharing structure. Information can't be reused. When people leave, all their knowledge leaves with them. So basically the net positive gains for a company having had that employee have just vanished when they left. So that's the situation that most companies are facing. And once they put in place an efficient file system, it just turns out to be so much better.
Yeah, I'm sure everybody listening, me included, has known that there's a file that you either had some information in or had a chart that you wanted to reproduce or something that was important for what you were doing at the time, and you keep going back to where you think it is, like when you lose your car keys and it's not there, and you go back to where you think it is again and it's not there, and then it randomly turns up somewhere where you weren't expecting or where felt logical at the time, but maybe things moved on, or like you say, people came and went. So tell us then how we can solve it. So I think you use this, is it vision? Is that right?
Yeah. So we have a technique called the vision method. Basic gist of it is that in order to organize a file system, you need a taxonomy for describing work. And most people don't know how to describe work. And so we describe work based on this concept of projects and operations and activities. And once you understand that, then you can go about organizing and orchestrating your files based on the type of work that you do. And there's a lot more to it. There's scaling, there's archiving, there's versioning, there's organizing things in, they're scaling it in terms of organizing things by portfolio folders and team folders, and shared folders and so on. But it's ultimately, it's a very simple system for naming and organizing and structuring files based on the type of work that you do. And we are actually just launching this week visionmethod.com, so individuals can learn about it. And then, but what we do today primarily is we help teams and organizations go through the process of designing their new file system, training their people on how to use it, and then providing adoption support and migration support so that they can move into a new file system that's sustainable. One of the coolest things about this is I actually have one of our oldest clients has been using the Vision method since 2010. And they haven't had to change their file system since then. So it's actually kind of we've got our own little longitudinal study about how effective this has been in the long run and sustainable, really.
13 years. It's a test of time, isn't it? A lot's happened in 13 years. Yeah. I'm just thinking as you were speaking, imagine being able to put your hands on pretty much any file at any time by having a structured way of doing it. I think we all find or think we've got a structured way, but that might be one person's structure and the way their mind works. Is there necessarily, there's certainly not in our business, I know, a way of teaching that to everybody, so everybody's using the same taxonomy, everybody's using the same version control methodology and the same archiving technology, or the owner of the file takes responsibility at a moment in time when that project's closed. So fascinating stuff, and yeah, good to hear you've got the kind of the longevity of a 13-year case study.
Yeah. Productivity is a team sport. So a lot of times people will read these books on the self-help section of the bookshelf, right? And it's about maybe managing their files or running meetings or pursuing email or whatever it is, right? And then they go to apply it in a corporate setting, and it just doesn't work because you need a shared understanding of how these things work in many different cases. And file management is especially one of those, where if you don't have a shared language that you're speaking in an organization and shared standards and an approach to doing these things, it can devolve into chaos, which is usually what happens.
Absolutely. And something that has been chaos and maybe in some organizations still is meeting management. So I think you touched on it before around an organization you're working with where they had 30-minute meetings, a gap for 30 minutes, and then 30-minute meetings. In lockdown, we saw clearly lots and lots of work move online. I think that bred a culture of back-to-back online meetings where there was lots of talk, lots of maybe actions or work given out, but then very little time in people's diaries to carry out those actions, which means we work longer, get more stressed, has all sorts of impacts kind of socially, personally, etc. And I'm not sure we've moved much further away from that. I still speak to lots of people that are in back-to-back meetings or can't speak to you because, you know, they're back-to-back for the rest of the day, week, whatever it might be. So talk to us about kind of meeting management. I think this is what you call Unite.
Yeah, that's right. So there's three big problems with meetings. Meetings are inefficient. We're in too many meetings, and the timing of meetings fragments, our work days. So we worked with this large division of one of the top 3 cable companies here in the U.S., and the average person there, including their engineers, spends 53% of their week in meetings, which is enormous. And you think about this, they have CIOs that handle technology and chief marketing officers and heads of business development, but where is the chief meeting officer, right? When more than half of their employees' time is spent in meetings. In going back to email, another 30% is spent in email. So you think you're hiring anybody, you're getting 20% of them because they're spending all their time in meetings and handling emails. And so going back to this cable company, less than 20% of their meetings had agendas. And I mean a bare minimum agenda, sets of bullet points. 46% of people multitask in those meetings. So not only is the meeting happening and it's fragmenting your day, but no one's paying attention. And then you look at the timing of meetings, and like you said, you can never get a moment on people's calendars. Worse than that, they can never get a moment to actually do their work. And so then companies try to compensate and create focus days, and then suddenly all their meetings are compressed into the other 4 days a week, and it just spirals. This problem spirals out of control. So when we work with a client, the first thing that we focus on is the efficiency of meetings. And to solve efficiency, you need what I found is that we need a guiding principle, and we're very opinionated on that. And our philosophy is that meetings are about making decisions. And the faster you make a good decision, the better it is for everybody, the faster the business will achieve its outcomes. So the question is, how do you do that? And so what we do is we teach people how to embed a really simple and effective decision-making model into every agenda. So we believe that all meetings should focus on one or more stages of a decision-making process that we call collect, analyze, and complete. So either you're collecting information to make a decision, which is expanding the possibilities. You're analyzing the information to make the decision, which is you're narrowing things down, or you're completing, which is you're making the decision itself. And so when you walk into a Unite meeting, you know where you are in the decision-making process. Are you collecting? Are you analyzing? Are you completing? Or are you doing multiple steps in a single meeting? And then we teach more techniques that layer on top of this so that people know how to efficiently manage the conversation flows, get to their outcomes, and ultimately make those decisions. And so we worked with a division of Alibaba that had 750 people across 3 continents. They literally had 2,000 standing meetings a week. And just by changing the efficiency of their meetings, they were expecting to save about $10 million a year. Wow. So that's kind of meeting management in a nutshell. And then, we go further and we help people work on timing studies and build more realistic schedules and create larger pockets of time so people can actually concentrate on work. So you can address the efficiency, then you can start adjusting the schedule and the timing, and really end up in a situation where people's lives are completely transformed coming out of this.
So that kind of time task management piece, is that Zone, is that right?
Yeah. So so once we've finished working with companies on the meeting side, then we start working with them on terms of time and task management. That's what Zone is about.
Amazing. I mean, I've worked in organizations and know of other organizations where it's death by meetings, it's meeting committees, it's meetings on meetings, it's having a meeting to review the meeting, all those things that I'm sure lots of the listeners can recognize and I'm sure have been part of. So some really good stuff there. If we kind of just tie up, do you want to just give us a quick recap on Stack, Vision, Unite and Zone?
Quick recap, I would say, is that most organizations don't spend enough time focusing on their core productivity processes. And these are the processes where people are spending 80% of their time. They're spending 30% of their time on emails, another 30% or 40% or even more on meetings. They don't have efficient processes for managing their tasks, and they don't have efficient filing systems to collaborate. And so by focusing on core productivity areas, you can unlock a tremendous amount of value for an organization. You can help people maximize their attention and you can achieve your business outcomes a lot faster.
Amazing stuff. Some of this stuff's blown my mind actually, because it's stuff that we've all struggled with day to day in different organizations. So I promise I will put the links on the show notes. And if people want to find out more, have a more detailed conversation, where's the best place for them to find you?
Then go to doublegemini.com.
Brilliant. We will put that on there as well for you. Final question from me then. Everybody gets it, comes on the podcast. What's the best bit of business advice you've ever been given?
That excellence is a habit.
Is that recent advice, or is that something that was instilled or given to you early in your career?
It's a little bit more recent, maybe something that I picked up maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And that is that if you focus on that excellence doesn't come about through luck, that it's a habit. And when you have that habit and when you build and cultivate that habit, it ends up pervading everything in your life and having a profound impact on every one of your outcomes. Somebody was telling me once, or I had read once, that let's say you did 5 projects for your employer, right? And all 5 of those projects you did just a mediocre job on. Well, at the end of the year, no one would really remember that you worked on any of those projects. But let's say one of those projects, you just took it all the way. You did an incredible job on it. You did something that was truly excellent. Everyone will remember you, and it gives you so many more possibilities for where the future can come. And over time, you can actually build the capacity to do an incredible job on all 5 of those things. And I think that's by cultivating the concept of excellence as a habit.
Amazing, really good. Like that one, one of the best ones we've had. So appreciate your time for coming on. Again, really enjoyed this chat. You've made me think. Hopefully, people listening will reach out, further the conversation. But we'll pause there. And again, thanks for coming on and taking the time.
Thank you.